Hello students, the structural and functional unit of all living organisms is the cell. Depending upon the number of cells present in organism's body, organisms can be classified into two: unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. Unicellular organisms have only a single cell, whereas multicellular organisms have more than one cell. In unicellular organisms, a single cell performs all the functions of the body. For example, amoeba is a unicellular organism and all the functions of amoeba's body is performed by a single cell, like movement, intake of food, which is known as endocytosis, digestion and excretion. In multicellular organisms, division of labor is there. A particular function is performed by a group of cells which are similar in their shape and size. Human beings are example of multicellular organisms. In humans, the muscle cells, they contract and relax to cause the movement. Nerve cells, they carry the messages to and from the brain. Blood flows to transport oxygen and nutrients to different parts of the body. Plants are examples of multicellular organisms. Xylem and Phloem are known as vascular tissues in plants which carry this water and food to different parts of the plant. A particular function is carried by a group of cells which are located at a definite place in an organism's body. This cluster of cells is called a tissue. Blood and muscle in humans and xylem in plants is an example of tissue. Now let's try to define a tissue. A group of cells that are similar in structure and work together to achieve a particular function forms a tissue. Now let's find out, are plants and animals made up of same type of tissues? For that, we should first look into the differences between plants and animals. Plants are stationary, they do not move. Animals move in search of food, mates and shelter. Since plants are upright, they need a large quantity of supportive tissue. There are three types of supportive tissues in plants: Collenchyma, Sclerenchyma and vascular tissue. Collenchyma constitutes living cells, Sclerenchyma contains dead cells, and vascular tissue is made up of both living and dead cells. Most of the tissues that animal contain consist of living cells. The growth in plants is limited to certain regions. That means only certain regions of the plants grow. But in animals, the growth is uniform. The organs and systems are simple in plants. The organs and organ system are more complex in animals compared to plants as the functions are different. Now let's talk about tissues which help to carry out different functions in plants and animals. Let's get started with plants. Meristematic tissues are responsible for growth in plants. Cells in these tissues are capable of dividing and forming new cells throughout the life of plants. They are undifferentiated cells. That means they are not responsible for a particular function. They can develop into all the other tissues and organs in plant. They have the potential to become any type of specialized cell. When these cells get differentiated, they lose the capacity to divide and they perform a specific function. The new cells produced from these meristematic cells are initially like the meristematic cells, but then they grow, mature and their characteristics change, and finally they become the components of another tissue. They are converted into permanent tissues. Generally, the meristematic tissues are present in specific areas like root, stem, leaf base, etc. Depending upon the region which they are present, the meristematic tissues are of three types: apical meristem, lateral meristem, and intercalary meristem. Apical meristems are present in the growing tips of the root, stem, and leaves. It increases the length of stem and root. Lateral meristems are found parallel to the sides of the stem. It is called secondary meristem. It increases the girth or thickness of the stem. Intercalary meristem helps to grow the portions of nodes, internodes, and the base of the leaves. Nodes are the points from where the buds, leaves, and twigs appear. So, intercalary meristems are present in these nodes. Now, let's do an experiment to learn more about the function of apical meristem. Take 2 glass jars and fill them with water. Take 2 onion bulbs and place them on each jar with upside down. Keep them for 2 to 3 days. After 3 days, we can see the roots running out of them. Here we can see in both jars, roots are there. Cut the root tips of the second onion bulb and again keep them in the same position for 2 to 3 days. Observe them after 3 days. We can see the root from the first onion bulb have grown more in length. Here you can see this root has grown more in length, but there is no change in the root of the second onion bulb. This helps to learn the apical meristem, which is responsible for the length of the root. It is present at the tip of the root. The root of second onion bulb has no change as we did cut the tip of the root. It did lose the apical meristem and the growth stopped. Cells of the meristematic tissues are very active. They have dense cytoplasm in its cells, they have thin cell walls and have prominent nuclei. These features help in the active cell division. Which all are the features help in active cell division? It is the dense cytoplasm, thin cell wall and prominent nuclei. In the chapter Fundamental Units of Life, we learned that cells have vacuoles. But these meristematic cells do not have vacuoles. As these meristematic cells are meant for cell division, they do not store food and water and hence they lack vacuoles. A few minutes before, I explained that the meristematic cells divide, mature and they take up a specific function. But after this, they lose the ability to divide again. These cells together form a tissue and it can be called as a permanent tissue as they will not divide again. The process by which the meristematic cells take up a permanent shape, size and function is called differentiation. That means meristematic cells take up a permanent shape and they perform a specific function. After that, they do not have the capacity to divide and this process is known as the differentiation. Example of permanent tissues are xylem and phloem. As a result of this differentiation, various types of permanent tissues are formed as the newly formed cells take up different functions. For example, imagine that these are the meristematic cells. These are the meristematic cells and these cells divide. They divide to form this group of cells and here another group is there. These groups, they take up a specific function and another group take up another function. Thus, they form two permanent tissues and they will not divide again. The permanent tissues can be divided into two: simple permanent tissue and complex permanent tissue. Simple permanent tissues are made up of single type of cells. Complex permanent tissues are made up of more than one type of cells, and these different cells coordinate to perform a common function. Now let's do an experiment to know more about the different types of permanent tissues in plant stem. Take a stem from any plant using a razor or blade, cut very thin slices from the stem, place it on a petri dish filled with water, take it with the help of a brush and keep it on a glass slide. Put a small drop of safranin, which is a biological stain, onto it so that we can clearly observe the tissues under microscope. Now place a cover slip without forming air bubbles and observe it under microscope. We can see these tissues. The outermost layer, this layer is called the epidermis. This epidermis covers stem, root, leaf, flower, fruit and seed. It will protect the inner tissues from mechanical damage. It will prevent water loss and infection. And here you can see the xylem and phloem. This is the xylem and this is the phloem. Together they are known as the vascular tissues, which carry the food and water to different parts of the plant. We can see layers of cells beneath the epidermis. They are called simple permanent tissue. They contain single type of cells. Simple permanent tissues can be of three types: parenchyma, collenchyma and sclerenchyma. Let's learn more about them. Below the epidermis, we can see collenchyma tissue. This collenchyma can be found in young stems, petioles and leaf wings. They are composed of living cells and they are elongated. Here you can see the cells of collenchyma. They are elongated cells. They have irregular cell walls. The cell walls of collenchyma have thick deposit of cellulose. These thick cell walls give strength to the tissues. The cells are tightly packed and they have fewer intercellular spaces. You can see here there is no space between the cells. So that means they have no intercellular spaces. Due to thick cell walls and fewer intercellular spaces, collenchyma gives structural support and mechanical support. It provides flexibility to the plant and allows the plant to bend during wind. Collenchyma allows the plant to bend during wind. Parenchyma. A few layers below the epidermis, we can see parenchyma tissue. The cells are generally oval or spherical in shape. You can see here these cells, they are spherical or oval in shape, and these cells are not packed tightly as in collenchyma. They have intercellular spaces. Here you can see clearly there are intercellular spaces between the cells, and parenchyma generally stores food. As a result, they have large vacuoles to store food. It contains a chlorophyll and performs photosynthesis. When photosynthesis is carried out by parenchyma cells, they are called chlorenchyma. As they perform photosynthesis, store food and transport nutrients between the cells, they need thin cell walls. In aquatic plants, the parenchyma has large air cavities. This will help the aquatic plants to float on water. Such parenchyma is called aerenchyma. The cells of sclerenchyma are dead. They are long and narrow. Their cell wall is thick due to the presence of lignin deposits. You can see here these cells, they have thick cell walls due to the deposit of lignin. The tissue is found in stem, around the vascular bundles, in the vein of leaf and in the outer covering of seeds, nuts and husk of coconut. It provides strength to the plant parts. Here you can see this is the vascular tissue, the xylem and phloem, and over here you can see the sclerenchyma. Over here you can see sclerenchyma cells. We saw the structures in the section of a stem. Now let's observe leaf under microscope. Take a fresh royal leaf, stretch and break it. While breaking, keep it stretched gently so that some peel or skin projects out from the cut. Remove this peel and put it in a petri dish containing water. Then transfer it onto a glass slide. Add a few drops of saffron in. Place a cover slip over it without forming air bubbles. Now observe it under microscope. We can see the outermost layer of epidermis. This layer is the epidermis. Here, epidermis is there. The cells of epidermis are flat. The entire surface of the plant is covered by this layer of epidermis. Since their function is to provide mechanical support and protection to the inner parts, there is no intercellular space between these layers. The cells form a continuous layer in the epidermis tissue. In the plants which are growing in dry habitat, the epidermis is thicker. This will help to prevent water loss. Are you familiar with aerial plants? Aerial plants do not have underground root system. They are located above ground. Orchids and Spanish moss are examples of aerial plant. In the picture, you can see Spanish moss. In them, the epidermal cells secrete a waxy water-resistant layer on their outer surface. This will help to prevent water loss and protect them from the attack of fungi. We can observe small pores here and there in the epidermis of the leaf. This portion is the epidermis of the leaf, and here you can see here small pores are there. Those pores are called stomata. You might be familiar with the terms transpiration. It is the loss of water in the form of water vapor. This transpiration takes place through this stomata. Stomata is enclosed by two kidney-shaped cells. These cells are called guard cells. Through this guard cell, the exchange of gases with the atmosphere takes place. Here you can see the transpiration through the guard cells. Epidermal cells of the roots, they have some long hair-like parts. These are the hair-like parts in epidermis, small hair-like projections. This is the cross-section of a root. And they greatly increase the surface area to absorb water. In some plants in desert, the epidermis has a waxy coating of cutin. This cutin is actually a waterproof chemical and it will prevent the water loss from desert plants. When the plants grow older, the outer epidermis undergo changes. We learned previously that Robert Hooke observed the cork of a tree under the microscope and observed the cells for the first time. Cork is the outer layer in the bark of a tree. Let's understand how this cork is formed in trees. As the plant grows, the epidermis undergo changes. Here you can see this green layer, this is the epidermis, and when the plant grows, this epidermis undergoes some changes. Below the epidermis, cortex is found. This is cortex. This area is the cortex. And this cortex contains secondary meristematic cells. Primary meristem helps the plant to grow in length, and secondary meristem is responsible for the thickness of the plant. So these secondary meristematic cells are there in the cortex, and they produce layers of cells. They produce layers of cells which together constitute the cork. The cells of cork are dead and they are tightly packed without any intercellular space. This cork is an outer protective tissue and the cell walls have a substance called suberin. This suberin will not allow water and gases to pass through this cork. We learned about the simple permanent tissues which are composed of only a single type of cells. Complex permanent tissues are made up of more than one type of cells. All these cells together coordinate to perform a single function. Examples are xylem and phloem. They are called conducting tissues. That means they transport water, food and minerals throughout the plant. Xylem carries water and minerals from roots to stem and leaves. Food produced in the leaf by photosynthesis is transported by phloem to the stem and roots. Let's learn more about xylem tissue. Xylem has four types of cells: tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma and xylem fibers. Let's learn first about tracheid. This is a tracheid. They are elongated and these are pits. They have thick cell walls and the cells are narrow, hollow and elongated. Their tubular structure helps to conduct water vertically. Water moves from tracheid to tracheid, passes through a membrane called the pit membrane. Here you can see these are the pits. And water from one tracheid to another tracheid passes through a membrane in the pits known as the pit membrane, and this pit membrane will prevent the passage of air bubbles. This tracheid is an individual cell and they become dead when they mature. Now xylem vessels, let me draw here. This is a vessel and here another is there, here another is there, and they have openings here. This is a series of cells. This is one cell, second cell and third cell, and this one cell is known as a vessel member. The vessel members have large openings on their end walls called the perforation plate. This is the perforation plate. Here you can see they have large pores. Perforation plate allow the passage of water and dissolved substances through it. Shorter than tracheid. These vessels are shorter than tracheid but much broader. As a result, water flows through it rapidly. The cells become dead when they mature. Xylem parenchyma composed of living cells. They store food, that is carbohydrate and water, and they have large vacuoles to store the food. Prominent nucleus is there in parenchyma. These are the parenchymal cells. They have prominent nucleus inside it and they contain large vacuoles to store food. Fibers are supportive in function. Moving on to phloem. Phloem transport food from leaves to root and stem. Phloem consists of four cells: sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem fibers and phloem parenchyma. Sieve tubes consist of sieve elements. This is the sieve tube and this single one, this one is called a sieve element. The cells are elongated and the cells are living cells. The end walls contain large pores called the sieve plates. These are the sieve plates. You can see here large pores are there and they provide connection between two adjacent sieve elements. This is one sieve element and this is another, and this sieve plate, they provide the connection between these two sieve elements. They lack nucleus at maturity. Companion cells in phloem, they will be here. Besides this sieve tubes, companion cells will be there and they are closely associated with the sieve elements. They take part in loading and unloading sugar into sieve elements and they are living cells. Phloem fibers support the conductive cells. These phloem fibers are dead cells and phloem parenchyma, as in Xylem Parenchyma. They store food and help in the transportation of food. Till now we learned about plant tissues. Now let's move on to animal tissues. Our body is made up of different kind of tissues. Our daily activities include walking, running, etc. These activities are possible due to the contraction and relaxation of muscular tissues. When we breathe, we inhale oxygen and we can see that our chest moves. This is due to the action of muscle tissues. The inhaled oxygen is mixed with blood, which is again another tissue. The blood carries oxygen to different parts of our body and cells. Cells use this oxygen to carry out its functions, and mitochondria uses this oxygen to produce energy. The blood also carries waste from different parts of the body to liver and kidney for disposal. There are a number of tissues in our body like epithelial tissue, connective tissue, muscular tissue, nervous tissue, etc. Blood is a type of connective tissue, and let's learn about them in detail. Like we learned in plants, the epithelial tissues cover most of the organs and cavities inside the body. This epithelial tissue helps to separate the different organ systems in our body. Our skin is made up of epithelial tissue. Like that, the epithelial tissues are present in the lining of mouth. We know that blood flows through the blood vessels. These blood vessels are lined by epithelial tissues. They are present in lung alveoli and kidney tubules. Lung alveoli help in the gaseous exchange during breathing. Gaseous exchange is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. The cells in epithelial tissues form a continuous layer without any intercellular spaces. They function as a protective barrier from outside environment. As it is covering our body, anything that enters or leaves our body must pass through at least one layer of epithelial tissue. The epithelial tissues are selectively permeable. It exchanges materials between the body and external environment and between the different parts of the body. A few minutes before, I explained that various epithelia are present in our body, like that of in mouth, kidney and lungs. The various epithelial tissues are different in their cellular shapes and arrangements. This difference in the epithelial tissues is related to their specific functions. Regardless of the type of the epithelium, it is separated from the underlying tissues by an extracellular fibrous basement membrane. Now let's learn about the different types of epithelia. First, look into the squamous epithelium. They can be seen in the lining of blood vessels and lung alveoli, mouth and esophagus lining. It is composed of a single layer of flat cells. They are extremely thin and delicate. They are permeable and allow the small molecules to pass through it by diffusion. Example is the diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide, which takes place in the lung alveoli. Next is the stratified squamous epithelium. In this type, the squamous epithelial cells are arranged in layers upon a basal membrane. You can see these layers of squamous epithelial cells. Our skin is made up of this stratified epithelium, that is the squamous epithelium arranged in layers, and these layers help to protect our body. Now, simple columnar epithelium. Columnar means pillar-like. The cells are pillar-like cells. It lines most of the organs in digestive tract like stomach, small intestine and large intestine. They have an oval-shaped nucleus. Here you can see oval-shaped nucleus, and they are located at the basal region. Its function is to absorb the digested food. Next, ciliated columnar epithelium. It is present in the upper respiratory tract. central part of spinal cord and uterus. They are columnar epithelial cells with cilia. You can see the small hair-like projections. These are called the cilia and they can move. These ciliary movements move mucus and other substances in the respiratory tract. Next is the cuboidal epithelium. It lines the kidney tubules and ducts of salivary gland. It consists of a single layer of cube-like cells. You can see cube-like cells here. They have large spherical and central nuclei. It provides mechanical support. Glandular epithelium is there. Their main function is secretion and it covers the glands of our body. Now moving on to connective tissue. From the name itself we can understand the function of this tissue. Connective tissues connects or binds structures together. It forms a framework, supports organs, stores fat, it transports substances and gives protections against diseases. These connective tissue occur throughout our body. As I said earlier, blood is a connective tissue which transports substances. Bone is a connective tissue which gives support. Let's understand more about it. Cells of connective tissue are loosely spaced and embedded in intracellular matrix. Now you may be wondering, what is this intracellular matrix? The intracellular matrix is a material that fills the space between the cells. It can be a fluid, it can be a jelly, denser or rigid. The cells are embedded in this intracellular matrix. The nature of this matrix depends upon the function of connective tissue. There are various kinds of connective tissue. Let's learn about them. Blood. Blood is a connective tissue. Blood cells are embedded in a fluid called plasma. This plasma is the matrix. This plasma contains proteins, salts and hormones. In this plasma, the blood cells like red blood cells, white blood cells and platelets are suspended. Blood is a connective tissue and blood flows throughout our body to distribute oxygen, digested food and hormones. It carries the waste materials to the excretory organs. Now let's learn about bone. It forms the framework, that is the skeleton that supports the body. It supports the muscles and the main organs in our body, like the heart and lungs are inside the rib cage and brain is inside the cranium. Bone cells are embedded in a hard matrix. In blood, we saw fluid matrix, that is plasma, but in bone, the cells are embedded in hard matrix, and this hard matrix composed of calcium and phosphorus components. Bones are connected with each other by means of another connective tissue called ligament. Here you can see this is a knee bone and this is the ligament which connects these two bones. These ligaments are elastic in nature. They contain very small amount of matrix. Muscles and bones are connected with each other by another connective tissue called tendons. Here this is muscle and this is a bone and this muscle is connected to the bone by means of this tendon. Tendons have limited flexibility and they are very strong. Cartilage. Cartilage exists in joints, bones, spine, lungs and ears. Here you can see this area. This is the cartilage. Solid matrix is there which is composed of proteins and sugars. Cartilage contains solid matrix. We can fold the cartilage of ear but we cannot bend the bones in our arms. From this we can understand the tissues are different in our body. Next is areolar connective tissue. It is found between skin and muscles, around blood vessels, nerves and in bone marrow. It supports the internal organs and helps in repair of tissues. Next is the adipose tissue. Adipose tissue stores fat. It is found below the skin and internal organs. The cells of the adipose tissue are filled with fat globules. It insulates the body. This heat insulation keeps our body warm when we are exposed to colder temperatures. Now let's learn about muscular tissue. Muscular tissue is responsible for our body movements. Without this tissue, we will not be able to move. Muscles contain special proteins called contractile proteins that contract and relax to cause movement. We have three types of muscles in our body: skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, and smooth muscles. Skeletal muscles, they are voluntary muscles. They move according to our will. The muscles in the hands and legs, they are examples of these skeletal muscles. They are attached to the bones by means of tendon. Here you can see a tendon. This is the tendon. This muscle is attached to the bone by means of this tendon. Under the microscope, these muscles show alternate light and dark bands. Here you can see light and dark bands. This will give the muscle a striated appearance, and thus skeletal muscles are called striated muscles. The contraction and relaxation of these light and dark bands cause the movement. Cells of this tissue are long, cylindrical, unbranched, and they have many nuclei, hence called multinucleate. Smooth muscles are involuntary muscles. That means the movement of this muscle is not according to our will. These muscles are found in the digestive organs, iris of the eye, and uterus, and in the bronchi of lungs. The cells are spindle shaped, long with pointed ends. They are uninucleate, having only one nucleus. Unlike the skeletal muscles, the striations are absent in smooth muscles. Muscles of the heart is called cardiac muscle. They are also involuntary muscles. The rhythmic contraction and relaxation of these cardiac muscles are responsible for the pumping of blood from the heart. The cells are cylindrical and branched. They have a single nucleus and hence uninucleate. Nervous tissues, they are tissues of the nervous system. Anything or any event that causes a reaction in our body can be called as a stimulus. The cells of the nervous tissue catch these stimuli and they transport it into the brain. They transport the stimulus very rapidly. They also transport the messages from brain to different parts of the body. The brain, spinal cord, and nerves are composed of these nervous tissues. The cells in the nervous tissue is called a neuron. This is a neuron, and it has a cell body with cytoplasm and a nucleus, and from the cell body a long thin hair-like structure arises that is called axon. There are short and branched parts arising from cell body called dendrites. And in this axon you can see this is a Schwann cells. Schwann cells are supportive in nature, and this axon is covered with myelin sheath. An individual nerve cell can be up to a meter long. The messages pass through this neuron as electrical impulses, and it is called a nerve impulse. These nerve impulses allow us to move our muscles and react to a particular stimulus. That's it about tissues. If you like this video, please share it with your friends. If you have any queries, put it in the comment box. Thank you.